let's talk about the biggest surprise of the coaching carousel. I think it's more surprising right now that Ben Johnson, Lions OC, is not a head coach than Bill Belichick.
I would agree with that.
Because I can point out all of the reasons why the shine is off of Belichick's star and yada, yada, yada. Ben Johnson, not only is he the hotshot guy who's been good every year, but he coaches offense and he gets things out of quarterbacks, and that is what everybody wants. And so the fact that he didn't want it is incredible. And to your point, it says a lot about what's going on with the Detroit Lions.
I think that was the biggest factor, or my first reaction when I saw that Ben Johnson was staying in Detroit. I was like, wow, is this an endorsement for Dan Campbell and the culture that is in Detroit? It is everything we all think it is. It is everything that I've seen it be over the last 2 seasons, so much so that I heard the same things that I think it was Adam Schefter that initially reported that Ben Johnson's asking price spooked a lot of teams. And I can corroborate this with the stuff that I heard, which is his asking price was a lot. And I think it comes from the fact that Ben Johnson was like, if you're going to pull me away from this team where we've built something so special, and Detroit seems so close to being able to get to a Super Bowl, which is what it seems like Ben Johnson is, like the ultimate football guy who wants a Super Bowl and values that over the money. It's going to take a lot for you to pry me away from this situation that I really enjoy, that has a young core to build around, where they're so receptive to everything that Ben Johnson does. And I've talked to defensive coaches even in Detroit that tell me that as far back as training camp, they would have answers finally to something that Ben Johnson was trotting out there. And the next day, Ben Johnson would have answers for whatever they just did. And they would be completely stumped again. This is a guy that works so incredibly hard and can absolutely evolve with this Detroit team to make them better and to get them over the hump in what's undoubtedly going to be a tougher field next year.
You can tell looking around at the accounts and the reporters that talk to agents and front offices and things like that. Like, there's some degree of people were insulted that Ben Johnson would like ask for this much money. Like, who do you think you are? You got to have like a more realistic expectation. But I love the idea that Ben Johnson is like, oh, no, I don't necessarily expect anybody to pay me that.
Right.
That's just what I want if you're going to make me leave this situation that I love very much and think so highly of.
And I mean, he's come out and talked about how much his wife and his family love Detroit. And again, Dan Campbell is one of those guys that just makes you want to run through a brick wall for him. So I think it also has to do again with, you look at the guys that really popped off for this Detroit offense this year. Sam Laporta, rookie. Jahmyr Gibbs, rookie. You look at even Amon-Ra St. Brown in his 3rd year. And you have David Montgomery. You have so many fun pieces to work with on top of having one of, if not the best offensive lines in football, which GM Brad Holmes really focuses on. That's how he built this team, was through the trenches. You can't ask for a better situation as a coordinator. And I have to imagine that even though it was reported that Ben Johnson is not getting any more money as a coordinator, he has to be one of the highest paid coordinators in the league at this point because of everything that he brings to this team and where he's gotten them.
He got a raise last year when he pulled his name out of the hat, and I guarantee
you one's coming again.
He's going to get another one, which, okay, you just touched on it, but it makes a lot more sense when you dive into what the Lions are right now as well. Because, and we talked about it on Sunday, there's no way around it. They blew an opportunity.
Sure.
You lose a 17-point lead in the second half of a conference championship game. But it's easy to get swept up in, like, it is hard to make it back. And I love Dan Campbell having the honesty to say, we might not ever do this again, because so many teams haven't.
Right.
But the future looks a lot brighter than I initially realized, if I'm being honest. Like, you sit here and you say, oh, it's the Lions. Like, you don't associate them with sustained success. And then you dive into it. This Detroit Lions team that won 11 games has a projected $60 million in cap space. The only like crazy contracts that they are paying out right now are to Jared Goff, Taylor Decker, and Frank Ragnow. Yeah. Those are like the only, and all those guys are set up. Like, other than Jared Goff, which, by the way, if the Lions are willing to extend him this year, which I think they will, they can create more cap space.
Right.
So
$60 million is the basement.
Exactly. And on top of that, nobody truly impactful is a free agent. Like Jonah Jackson, left guard, good player. He's your only major free agent on offense.
I was going to say, and he does factor in very, very heavily.
He does, but you could afford to bring him back with all of that money.
Sure could.
Emmanuel Mosley and C.J. Gardner-Johnson, both good players, both spent a healthy chunk of the season injured anyway.
Yep.
So you can't sit here and tell me losing those guys is detrimental to your team when they got to the conference championship game.
You're going to need to tweak your past, like your defensive secondary regardless, because that ended up still being an issue this year after it was the year before. But it was, again, injury related. It was C.J. Gardner-Johnson being out, Emmanuel Mosley being out for all but like a portion of a game where he tore his other ACL. Heartbreaking. But yeah, I mean, those are the holes you need to fill. You obviously... Everybody could always use another edge. You need someone on the other side of Aiden Hutchinson. But that being said, Aiden Hutchinson is only in his second year.
Yeah.
And he was a first-round pick, so you have him under team control for another 3 years.
They have Penei Sewell under team control they're going to pick up his fifth-year option.
Oh, absolutely.
So at least 2 more years. And they have 4 picks in the top 100 of the draft this year. They got an extra one for trading TJ Hawkinson.
Yep.
And these aren't big sexy picks because they won so many games. They don't pick until 30th in the first round of the draft this year. But look at what Brad Holmes did this year. And I get it. You're not going to get Brian Branch, Sam Laporta, and Jahmyr Gibbs out of every draft class.
Right.
But if they find...
And Jack Campbell. We haven't even talked about Jack Campbell. He doesn't have the gaudy stats, but good God. I mean, I talked to Aaron Glenn before the season, and this is before we got to see Jack Campbell really in action. And I asked him kind of bluntly, like, make this make sense to me. An inside linebacker in the first round, after you also already took a running back, has come under a lot of scrutiny. Make it make sense. And Aaron Glenn told me he's going to be our middle linebacker for the next 10 to 12 years. And I was like, well, when you put it like that, I kind of get it.
If you add one difference maker in the draft, a starter.
Right. That's good.
That's a win.
Yeah.
And I trust them to do it based on what they've been doing recently. So you add that to the money to add free agents or retain your own free agents because you can afford to pay them. What I'm trying to say is I didn't think this on Sunday night.
Right.
And then I spent some time looking at it and I was like, oh, when it comes time for us to make all of our preseason lists and who we think is going to make the Super Bowl and who's going to be at the top of the power rankings, the Lions are going to be right there.
Vegas has them as the 3rd best Super Bowl odds already.
That I would put them behind the 2 teams playing in this year's game.
That's all that they're behind.
I can't think of a whole lot of others.
No?